This is our fireside chat with the Curmudgeon. My name's Brent Belair. I'm here with Mr. Paul St. Pierre, politician, journalist, former police commissioner, and author, as well as a serial blogger.
Well, I've had a hell of a good life, really. Very good. I've never really had to work. and all that time. I made one exception. Politics was very hard work, very hard. And took a lot out of me, just drained me like an empty sack. But the others, writing newspaper columns, and that sort of thing, I really found not work at all. In fact, Jim Taylor, whom you may know, who is a sports writer, of about my age and time, he said, "Paul, we must never, ever tell them how easy it is. never let them know." Writing a book is not easy.
I would imagine it involves a fair amount of discipline in order to do it every day.
It does. In fact, I need some kind of an impeller that says you've got to have this done by such and such a day, or the whole deal is off. But hard work was politics.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
You could never tell what progress you were making. You could never be sure what you were doing and whether it was the right thing. Well, and whether, if it was the right thing today, would it be the right thing 5 years down the road.
But one of the things that I wanted to ask you was, when did you start writing? And
I really started in school. I enjoyed English classes in school. I enjoyed writing essays in school. And most kids don't like most schoolwork, and I didn't either. But in the English class, and I had several different teachers over the years, I was always happier doing that than any other single subject. Happier than in science.
What was the first book or the first recognized piece of writing that you did?
An odd sort of thing. The first thing I had published with display. I had things published in the little high school journal we put out, but I don't think that counts. But one of the commercial papers in Halifax was the Halifax Chronicle. It was the oldest paper in town and the morning paper, and had quite a reputation. And I wrote a letter to the editor to it. And somebody who wasn't thinking very well, probably, looked at it and said, "Oh, let's put this on the second front page." And I woke up next day to find myself on the second front page.
And how old were you?
Oh, I was about 13, 14. Yeah, and it thrilled me like nothing else.
Terrible for the ego.
Yeah. Oh, and the ego has a great deal to do with writing. If you don't have a lot of ego that you want stroked, I doubt that you'll ever go very far in writing.
So, were you a journalist before you were a writer, or were you a writer before you were a journalist?
Oh yeah, I was a journalist until the late 40s, I guess, is when I started. No, the early 50s, when I started writing a column, which is creative writing as opposed to reporting what you
So,
say.
as a journalist, when did you journalism? Tell me a little bit about your early journalism career.
Well, I should warn you that where I was brought up, journalism was a bad word. A journalist was a reporter who couldn't hold a job. And if you called somebody a journalist, you were not complimenting them. However, the modern age has got over that, and journalist is a proper word to use now. But no, I spent most of my time, like every other reporter, going out, watching things happen, writing them down, getting them down in a hurry, getting it story started, that at the beginning you had to go on, you had to find out what happened next. And whether it's a news story about an explosion in an oil refinery down in the harbor here, or whether it's a story about boy meets girl and marries her, it's still
Need to get to the
basically the same thing. It's a story.
In the late 40s or early 50s, you started writing a column at that
A
point?
newspaper column, yeah.
What was the name of the newspaper column?
Yeah,
Or,
I don't think it ever had a name. It had my name over it. That was for the Sun. I was longest writing for the Sun.
how long did you write for the Sun?
From
And
about,
we're talking about the
round
Vancouver
figures,
Sun.
55 to 65 or 70. Yeah.
Ah, the glory days of the Sun.
Yeah.
Before they moved to the new building.
Oh, yeah. And the publisher was Don Cromie, who had many eccentricities, almost as many as I have, but he adored good writing. And it didn't matter what type of a son of a bitch you were, if you could write a good story, Don had his hand on your shoulder.
Let's talk about when you moved from being we've gone from being a journalist to being a column writer. So you've gone from reporting, journalism, column writer. Then you started looking into long form novels.
Well, together with, that was part of the process. I was asked to write my first book by a newspaper friend in the East who'd been asked to gather a bunch of people for a children's book. And he said, write me a book, which I did. You know, I had a goal, I had a deadline, everything I needed. And it's still in print to this day, aimed at kids 14 to 16. Then I wrote another one, which I still consider one of my best, and that's Breaking Smith's Quarter Horse.
When was that? What year was that?
Smith's Quarter Horse came out about 1957, 58, or 59, about then. And it's been redone since. Disney took my Smith story and wrote it for a movie, but there's not very much talent in Hollywood, and I never watched the movie. I haven't seen it to this day. It's still around somewhere.
I'm sure it is. Were you influenced by anyone when you started writing for this children's book?
Well, I got refused later on, not early. I wrote Breaking Smith's Quarter Horse, and I gathered some of my columns together into books, and the publishers were glad to grab them. And I had about 5 books out, all of which sold well, and made me quite pleased. And suddenly, CBC, for some reason, took a scunner to me. And I was told that not only had our half-hour interview on such and such a book been canceled, I think it was the book that won the North American Prize for short stories that year.
Well, CBC's quite discerning. They don't want any winners.
Not only was it canceled, but would I please not bother phoning, they'll phone me if they want to.
Oh, I see. And you have no idea what might have caused that?
No, I have no idea. There's one that's partially biographical, called Smith and Other Events, which is a combination of things I've written and
like a compendium.
yeah, you know, pot quoting.
Yeah.
And In the Navel of the Moon, which was all set in Mexico. And
Now you have quite the tie to Mexico.
I read it just again, in the last few days, I could improve it. God knows there's no book ever written that the author couldn't improve when he looks back on it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm still fairly satisfied.
Yeah,
The
like it.
Table of the Moon, the people in it are still real, and some of the things that I forecast would happen have since happened.
Where did your ties to Mexico, how did they, you were
Oh,
originally from Halifax and you
Well,
found-
I left Halifax as soon as I was 18. I joined the Air Force, and I was invalided out of the Air Force, and then I came, I took a wireless operator's course. I'm a third officer in wireless telegraphy.
Oh, very
The
nice.
third officer.
Wireless telegraphy.
Yeah,
What exactly is wireless
yeah,
telegraphy?
that's pounding, a key pound.
Oh, I see. Key pounder, I got
Yeah,
you. Morse
and,
code.
I came out here with a couple of New Zealanders who had been actually working key pounders in the Atlantic during the war. Well, when the war with Germany ended, boom, that was flat. So they came out here to get a ship back to New Zealand. And we stayed in a hotel down on South Granville. And I had $8 left in my pocket at that time, I remember. One of my friends, named Paul, Dick Paul, said, let's write another letter to the ambassador. Tell him our next letter goes direct to Buckingham Palace.
Letter of complaint?
Yeah, they got shipped home as distressed British seamen.
Oh, well, of course.
But I couldn't call myself a depressed British seaman. So I went out and found work again with newspapers.
But when did you enter politics, and was it at which
Well,
level?
I was writing editorials. I was in charge of the editorial page in the Sun for a while. After I'd been a columnist, I became an editor. And the Sun was liberal. It was founded that way by the original Cromie. And I guess it still is today. Well, really it's just namby-pamby today.
Yeah, I don't think there's any...
None of them have any convictions or anything like that. But I simply got an offer to run in Chilcotin, and I couldn't resist. I ran.
So what was your motivation other than?
Well, I'd
civic duty?
always had an interest in politics. My family, who were solidly conservative, all the ones I knew, but politics was something we discussed at the dining room table, and the latest political up or down was always in our lives. And I gave a great deal of importance to politics. But politics are very, very tough, Dave. And you can never really be sure you're right. I think to this day, John A. MacDonald is sorry about things he did.
I'm sure he is. Yes, I'm sure he is.
But a few people burst out of the tide. One was John A. MacDonald, another was Wilfrid Laurier, speaking of Canada,
Mm-hmm.
another was Pierre Trudeau.
Mm-hmm.
And those three dominated, in total, almost 100 years of Canadian politics. You know, you had all their